Tornado Simulation on Plant Growth by Callum, Searock, and Adam Tardy.
Our original research paper was on the effect of tornadoes on wildlife, but we decided it was unethical to test on animals, so we decided to test it on plants. Our question was, do tornado-like winds affect plant growth? For our abstract, we wanted to see the effect of tornado-like winds on different plants. We chose tomatoes, which are deep-rooted, and corns, which are shallow-rooted. We planted the plants and let them grow for 1 month. After that, they were subjected to air compressor winds once a week for 30 seconds. Our hypothesis was tomato plants will grow differently when exposed to high winds that simulate a tornado. The plant with no wind will grow the tallest, and the plant exposed to tornado-like wind will be shorter because the roots will not be able to absorb as much moisture, and they are shorter and not as firm.
This was the first day that we planted our corn and we blew wind on it. As you can see, the stem is all over the place. This is the control. It is completely fine and still standing. And then this is before we blew wind on the soil, and then this is after. All the roots are exposed and the plant will not be able to get as much. You can see the growth rate over the 3 weeks, and the different colors represent each week. And as you can see, the control corn is growing at a steady rate of about 10%, or 5% rather, and the corn that was exposed to wind is 10% less growth rate. And the tomato has almost the exact same growth rate as the corn that was exposed to the wind, and the other tomato has the exact growth rate of the corn that was exposed to the wind. As you can see here, this was when we were blowing on the tomato, and we were always 4 feet away. This was the exact space that we were every time when we were blowing on wind on the tomato. And here is the soil once again displaced.
These are the future recommendations for replication of this experiment. We should have more plants to grow them in different gardens so they could be blasted with air and the other one would be protected. And there should be a way to measure the soil.
For our conclusion, the data supported our hypothesis, and the deep-rooted tomato plants did actually grow to be bigger than the short-rooted plants. This is because their roots were able to withstand the air better, and they could still absorb nutrients, and they did not get displaced.
Parts of the garden were in the sun while other parts were in the shade, and therefore we could not control the effects of the plant growth due to sunshine. Insects and other wildlife had access to the garden and may have eaten some of the leaves, and we should have been able to measure how fast the wind was blowing. These were the sources of air in our experiment. We only know how deep the roots were when the seedlings were planted. There were occasional wind that happened so that all the plants were exposed to wind. We were unable to measure the amount of soil that was displaced from the use of the compression blower. So when we took the plants out to measure the roots, we heard rips in the roots. So instead, we could have had we could have planted them in glass and seen the root growth over time, or we could have dug the roots out so none of them would have torn. So instead, we chose corn because it has shallow roots, and tomatoes because it has deep roots, and they both grow in the Midwest, where a lot of tornadoes happen. It's about 7.5 inches. Shoot. 9 or 10 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 inches. Corn plant, and this is the experimental corn plant. And the experimental corn plant had longer roots than the control.
This is our deep-rooted plant.
Oh, yeah, that is very deep-rooted. Our deep-rooted plant is 20 inches long.
That concludes our presentation on how winds affect plant growth.
Oh no, there's a tornado!
No.
Ah!